would wrestling be without rivalries? A waste of effing time, that's what. Because while watching random wrestling matches is good for a bit, it's the compelling storytelling brought about as a result of some proper antagonism that really gets us fans going. And it's the same for the superstars themselves, of course. Yes, a choreographed athletic exhibition is fine, but any wrestler worth their salt is going to derive true satisfaction from a long-term program with a suitable dance partner that, in the end, is going to lead to a bigger, more important match with, it's hoped, a far more pronounced crowd response. We've had some classic WWE rivalries worthy of Shakespeare over the decades, but with so many feuds to get invested in, some invariably don't get the love that they really ought to. Sometimes that's because the performers involved are better remembered for other rivalries with different opponents, and sometimes it's because wrestling fans are godforsaken ingrates who wouldn't know a great story if it was read to them just before bedtime. Whatever the reason, the following 10 tales remain overlooked and in need of revisiting. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are the 10 most underrated WWE rivalries ever. Join us. Number 10, MVP versus Matt Hardy. A depleted SmackDown roster in the summer of 2007 led to an excellent long-term feud between two of the Blue brand's hardest-working performers. MVP, who at the time had been on WWE television for under a year but was the reigning United States champion, began a dispute with Matt Hardy, which all started when he lost a non-title match to the Broken One, prompting him to claim that he was better than Hardy at, well, everything. So whether it was pizza eating, basketball dunking, boxing, arm wrestling, or beer drinking, Matt and Montel engaged in all manner of contests, building anticipation for their eventual title match. They then became bickering tag team champion partners and looked like they were on their way to becoming genuine pals when MVP attacked Matt, writing him out of the storyline while he recovered from injury. The Sensei of Mattitude made a shocking return at WrestleMania 24, costing MVP the Money in the Bank ladder match and reigniting their conflict. At Backlash 2008, Hardy finally got his big win, beating MVP and ending the franchise player's record-setting US title run. Whether doing skits, delivering promos, teaming, or wrestling one another, MVP and Matt Hardy displayed a ton of chemistry in their lengthy rivalry, and both men came out of it better than they were when they went in. Number 9, Mr. Kennedy versus The Undertaker. The feud between Matt and MVP had originally been discussed for Hardy and Ken Kennedy before the microphone master went down with an injury. Before he went off to start rehabbing, however, Kennedy had been on a roll thanks in large part to a major feud with The Undertaker. It all came about when the braggart, claiming to have beaten everyone on the SmackDown roster over the course of the previous year, demanded a move to Raw. But hold on a minute, player, Teddy Long was the general manager, and that meant a one-on-one match with the dead man, whom Kennedy had not yet vanquished. Their first meeting, a solid scrap at No Mercy 2006, ended in a disqualification win for Ken, which only sought to anger the Phenom, who then helped cost Kennedy the US title. Kennedy then won a First Blood match at Survivor Series thanks to an errant chair swing by MVP, but he ultimately lost the blow-off match, a bruising last ride affair at Armageddon. Kennedy was typically golden on the stick during this feud and really stepped up his game against the locker room leader. Taker, to his credit, did everything he could to help put over a man that many at the time felt was a future main eventer, and the result was a cracking rivalry that should be talked about more. Number 8, Edge versus Kurt Angle. One of the ideas behind the initial WWE draft split in the spring of 2002 was that it would give some members of a stacked roster a chance to break out of the pack and become genuine stars. While some found it harder than others, one of the early success stories was the ascendancy of Edge, who had been somewhat struggling to establish himself after breaking up with Christian the previous summer. A feud with the red-hot wrestling machine Kurt Angle, however, enabled the rated R superstar to demonstrate the full scope of his abilities, whether it was his comedic timing in backstage segments or his in-ring ability as a singles competitor. Their first match at Backlash was something of a breakout performance from Edge, who began to be taken a lot more seriously as a potential headliner, despite coming out of the bout on the losing end. The Canadian and the Olympian upped their stakes for the rematch at Judgment Day by putting their hair on the line. Edge came out of that one victorious and with his locks intact, while Angle received a very short back and sides with everything off the top in a memorable moment. Their final big match together inside a cage on a subsequent episode of SmackDown was another exemplary effort, also won by the Ultimate Opportunist. Number 7, CM Punk versus Jeff Hardy. Pitting a self-professed and self-righteous straight-edge savior against a devil-may-care candle burner was a stroke of genius, as the two opposites had a natural grudge that could be exploited as Punk slowly turned towards the dark side. The best in the world began to show signs of what was to come when he cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase and pinned Hardy to become World Heavyweight Champion immediately following the charismatic Enigma's grueling ladder match with Edge at Extreme Rules 2009. Punk walked the line beautifully between face and heel in the weeks that followed, and added fuel to the fire when he was disqualified after accidentally kicking the referee in the back after his eye was apparently injured in their match at the Bash. After that match, a bit more reality began to creep into their exchanges as Punk berated Hardy for his real-life past drug use and wellness policy violations. Jeff got his revenge and became champ once again at Night of Champions, before more twists and turns led to SummerSlam and a TLC match that saw the title once again around the waist of the straight-edge superstar. Punk would then begin a feud with a returning Undertaker, but not before closing the book on his cracking feud with the rainbow-haired warrior, beating him in a loser leaves WWE cage match on SmackDown. Number 6, Trish Stratus vs Stephanie McMahon. Nowadays, Trish Stratus is a WWE Hall of Famer celebrated for her multiple women's title reigns and barrier-breaking in-ring exploits in feuds with the likes of Lita, Mickie James, Victoria, and Molly Holly. Stephanie McMahon may not be quite as celebrated, but has done untold good work in WWE, whether behind the scenes or in the squared circle, and has been one of the best heels of the past 20 years. Fight me. Back in 2001 though, Trish was primarily a manager and used as eye candy, while the billion-dollar princess was in the process of finding her way as a character. When the two were paired together in a feud, expectations weren't exactly high. Fighting over Trish's affair with Steph's genetic jackhammer of a father, the two brought great energy to proceedings whenever they were involved physically, and a match was booked for the No Way Out pay-per-view. Amazingly, the pair had one hell of a bout filled with drama, a lot of crowd heat, and feisty brawling. Steph won the match thanks to some help from a conflicted William Regal, but that wasn't the end of the story. Trish getting covered in swill and barking like a dog may have been regrettable, but Canada's finest got her revenge at WrestleMania X7 when she slapped Vince in the face before running his daughter right out of the Houston Astrodome. Number 5, Randy Savage vs Crush. In the throes of a youth movement led by the new generation, WWE believed that Randy Savage was past it and stuck him behind the announce desk, only wheeling him out for special occasions or when somebody advertised failed to show up. Feeling like he had much more to offer between the ropes, the Macho Man gave it everything in his last major feud before departing for WCW as he took on Kona Crush. The real-life pals portrayed on-screen allies until weeks of miscommunication led to the Hawaiian Brute turning on his friend and kicking off their rivalry. Savage looked like a man possessed as he tried to get back at Crush and even threw Vince McMahon, then known more as an announcer, to the ground in a memorable segment. Crush got one over on Randy by costing him the WWE title in a match with Yokozuna. The two were constantly at odds and frequently engaged in frenzied brawls, necessitating a novel stipulation for their WrestleMania 10 score settler. In the first ever Falls Count Anywhere match in WWE, Savage beat Crush to end their feud, pinning him after hog-tying his legs, sort of, and then making it back into the ring to beat the count as per the rules. A logical story helped by heaps of passion and some great promos, this enabled one of the all-time greats to leave WWE on a high note. Number 4, Triple H vs Ric Flair. Speaking of all-time greats, how about Triple H and Ric Flair, eh? The cerebral assassin and the Nature Boy had been on-screen allies and Evolution stablemates since 2002, but the party was over a few years later, the game viciously turning on Slick Rick at Raw Homecoming and leaving the then Intercontinental Champion a bloody mess. And look, I know Flair can end up sporting a crimson mask if there's a particularly strong wind or something, so paper-thin is the skin on his forehead, but this was brutal. The claret continued to flow in their first major meeting at Taboo Tuesday, the former student and mentor colliding in a tremendous steel cage match for the IC title. Flair walked away the victor after rolling back the years, though I'm sure 1970s NWA fan Triple H felt like the real winner after producing a minor classic with his idol. The legends topped themselves later that month at Survivor Series, where they fought in a hellacious last man standing match. An almost 30-minute fight that went around the arena and saw the dirtiest player in the game spring another gusher. This is one of Flair's last truly great matches before he called it a career. Triple H had his hand raised in the end, but Flair had proven in the feud that he could still go at the top level. Number 3, Cody Rhodes vs Rey Mysterio. An unfortunate accident at the end of a routine SmackDown match led to one of the best feuds of 2011, as Rey Mysterio's exposed knee brace collided with the face of dashing Cody Rhodes, legitimately breaking the narcissist's nose and kicking off a months-long dispute that changed the career of the American Nightmare. The required surgery resulted in Cody having to wear a protective face mask on television while he recuperated, giving him time to work on his character, transforming his persona into some sort of Phantom of the Opera, though sadly without the singing. The rivalry was kicked into overdrive when Rhodes conspired with his father Dusty to attack and unmask the Master of the 619, and the obsessed Cody would continue to attack Rey for supposedly disfiguring him. It led to some great promo work and a match at WrestleMania 27, which was one of the best things on that show and handed Cody an important win on a grand stage. Their Falls Count Anywhere rematch at Extreme Rules was also great stuff, as was Cody placing a paper bag on the head of his adversary after another sneak attack. Rhodes has since credited Rey and this feud with helping to change his fortunes and step up his game at a critical juncture in his WWE run. Number 2, Bret Hart vs Jerry Lawler. These days, Jerry Lawler is looked at as that pervy bloke with a lecherous eye and a joke book about 50 years out of date. In the mid-90s, though, he was still looked at in the same way, but he was also a cracking pro wrestler, and when Bret Hart became King of the Ring, a natural rivalry was born. Jerry attacked the Hitman during his coronation and would continue getting under Bret's skin by incessantly taunting his parents. Interestingly, the feud also played out in Lawler's Memphis territory, albeit with the roles reversed and Hart playing the heel. Things finally came to a head at SummerSlam, with the so-called Burger King trying to weasel out of the match by feigning an injury. The excellence of execution ably disposed of Lawler's replacement, Doink the Clown, in a good match before Jerry revealed the ruse and belted Bret with his crutch. Bret looked to have won the real match too, but the decision was reversed when he refused to let go of the sharpshooter. Lawler taunting the fans as he's wheeled out on a stretcher was genuine genius, and they were set to continue their program in the run-up to Survivor Series before Jerry got himself in some legal hot water and plans were postponed. It was still damn good while it lasted though, and they would revisit their rivalry in '95 with the help of Hakushi and Isaac Yankem. Number 1, Steve Austin vs Dude Love. After Mr. McMahon's nightmare came true and Steve Austin captured the WWE title at WrestleMania 14, the tyrannical CEO went to an unexpected source in a bid to wrest the championship away from Stone Cold. Mick Foley resurrected his Dude Love persona and, while initially at odds with McMahon, eventually aligned himself with the chairman. The first Austin Love match at Unforgiven was a doozy, but ended in a somewhat unsatisfying DQ win for Love, necessitating a rematch. That would come the following month at Over the Edge, with McMahon instilling himself as special guest referee, as well as Stooges Patterson and Briscoe being given gigs as announcer and timekeeper. The Over the Edge bout was a massive improvement, a crazy car wreck of a match that encapsulated everything that was good and proper about the OTT Attitude Era. The Texas Rattlesnake naturally prevailed against the odds and moved on to new challengers, but the 2 pay-per-view matches and the work in interviews and other segments during the rivalry ensured that Austin's era began in true style. And if you're not going to raise a smile at Mr. McMahon and Mick Foley dancing with the lovely dudettes like drunk uncles at your cousin's wedding, causing the toughest SOB on the planet to corpse, then I just don't know what it is you want from your wrestling.